Okay. Hi, Stephen. How you going?
Oh, g'day, Pato. Doing fantastic. Thanks, mate.
Great. So it's a really great achievement to write a book. I can't even imagine. Well, I would love to actually write a book myself, but I don't know where to get started. So, I mean, there's a saying that everyone has a book in them, but is there is no finish the first book you've ever written?
Oh, I did write one really small book probably 4 years ago, but this is probably the first mass one that I've tried to get out there.
Yeah, yeah, unreal. And do you remember when you first heard about, I guess, the Backyard Ultra format?
Yeah, the first time I ever heard of it was right at the end of the quarantine Backyard Ultra in 2020. They'd come down to the final two people, and suddenly, every time I logged onto Facebook, people just kept talking about these two idiots who'd been running for days on end. I'd never heard of it before, and it just seemed bizarre. And then I had a friend that did a few backyard ultras, and I just saw it on social media. And so I'd been following him doing it for a few years before I finally jumped in. But oh boy, glad I did.
Yeah, yeah. I know you did well, and you actually ran at Clint Eastwood and broke 24 hours for the first time. Is that right?
Oh, I was stoked. That
Yeah,
was that was an epic day. It was so much fun.
yeah, yeah. It would have been. And
And it
then,
sort of puts, and to me, it puts all the other runners in perspective. Like in the book, we're talking about the 70s, the 80s, the 100 people. But for me, getting to 24, that's it was like all I needed. That was fantastic. Hopefully
oh yeah,
more, but yeah,
yeah. Well, I mean, 24 hours. I mean, it's a hard thing to do for anyone. I mean, even the runners who are the best. I mean, I still think the first 24 hours can sometimes be the hardest. Like that. Well, that's what they say anyway.
yeah, yeah. Fair enough.
Mm. So you mentioned that you first heard about the Backyard Ultra during the quarantine Backyard Ultra. Did the sound of the format grab you straight away, and did you know that you wanted to run one yourself?
To be honest, no. My first thought was this is a bit weird, and this might actually be the worst possible race for me
Right.
because I thought because some like I'm fairly injury prone, and I've been injured all my life. It feels like, and several times I've got injured when I've run without warming up properly, or I've run a bit and then had a bit of a break and then run again, and so I thought this could be the sort of race that's just designed to get me injured. So I was a little bit skeptical for the first couple of years, but oh, I was very wrong.
Yeah, yeah. So did you find that it actually is the opposite because you're running at a slow pace and you're taking lots of breaks? Do you think it's actually the opposite of that, and you're probably less likely to get injured doing a backyard
Yeah,
ultra?
yeah. To be honest, I think I am less likely. I'm certainly less sore after a backyard than if I do a traditional ultra,
Mm.
and I recover quicker after a backyard. Um, but also that's partly because I've put in a whole heap of things which probably feels silly to other people, but to try and make sure I am okay. So I'll warm up before the race starts, and sort of I might run a couple of kilometers before the backyard starts, and then I'll do my first couple of laps faster than any other laps, and
Right.
then do a heap of stretching after those first two laps because
Yeah.
I find that I think physios will tell you that most stretching on cold muscles is just a waste of time. But if you do it once you've warmed up, then it can be quite effective. So I try and do a good 20 minutes of stretching after lap one and lap two, and begin each lap by going quite slowly. I'll walk at the start most laps. Um, Once I'm going, though, I found at Clint Eastwood, once I've been going, for 10, 12 hours or so, I, I never cooled down that much. I just stayed warm. So I,
Yeah.
I gave up some of the walks after a while.
Right.
But I do all those sort of things just to make sure that the format works for me. But yeah, yeah, it hasn't been a problem at all injury wise.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you definitely can't like stop like 10 Ks into a marathon and just do stretches for 15 minutes and then
Yeah,
walk.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What other types of ultra running have you done apart from backyard ultras?
Yes, I've only done a few. I've done the Blackhall 100. I did a Scenic Rim 65.
Yeah.
Although technically didn't actually finish it because because a fire burnt through the course
Oh,
while we were running. That was the funniest day ever.
yeah,
And did the Guzzler 50. Um, yeah, and a few backyards. So,
yeah, yeah,
but seriously, every one of those races just felt like an epic day.
yeah,
Fantastic stories, just so much fun.
yeah, yeah, sure. So when did writing a book about backyard ultras become an idea?
Yeah, so it was actually November last year, so it's been really quite quick.
Yeah.
I was sitting in this conference, a global leadership summit,
Hmm.
and I was like a one-day conference. And I don't know if you've read Atomic Habits by James Clear.
I have
Um,
heard of it. I
yeah,
haven't
really
read
good
it.
book actually, and he's got a weekly email that I get as well. It's just really cool stuff. And I was listening to the first session where James Clear was talking, and to be honest, I've got no idea what he said. But early on, he said something. No idea. Oh well, I'm gonna have to try and find that video of it and watch it again because he said something which just suddenly made me think, no one's written a book about backyard ultras. But I was by then I've been following it for a few years and was loving the format. And I found that every single race there was some amazing story.
Hmm.
Like it was just incredible. But by then we'd had the stories of Dead Cow Gully, the previous satellite championships, a few of the classic Bigs races, and every time I looked at them, I could just see this incredible story. And so I'd read a few articles here and there, but just no one had written this story of it. Oh, someone needs to do that. Maybe I should do that. And for years I've thought I've got a good book in me. I can remember as a primary school kid thinking, I'm going to be a writer one day. I reckon I can write a book. And it has suddenly occurred to me, I could write the Backyard Ultra book.
Yeah,
And then I thought of like a couple of problems straight away. One was, what if someone else is already doing it? Like
yeah,
there'd be no point in writing the second Backyard Ultra book.
yeah.
There's no point. And what if, Christopher McDougall has already decided to do it
Hmm.
and and I do all the work just as his suddenly comes out. I went, ah, great. That was just a complete waste of time. And you couldn't do it without Laz's blessing. And so then I thought, oh, okay, I could probably solve both of those issues by if I could somehow or other contact Laz and say, do you know if anyone else is writing the book? Because if anyone was writing it without him, then it'd be a pretty dodgy book.
Yeah,
Because you really need the founder,
yeah,
his insights into it, and then I could if he'd be prepared to give me his blessing, then fair enough. But I thought, oh, I don't know. Like, what's the chance he's gonna? Um, well, one, I'll find his contact details because I knew he was fairly, hard to find, and two, whether it actually reply. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't. Then I keep watching the rest of this Global Leadership Summit. Oh yeah, and I stopped listening to pretty much everything else that happened that day. And by the end of the day, I had this full outline for the book with probably 70% of what the final book ended up being. Oh yeah, this story here, this story here. Final speaker was this guy, Ryan Leake. He tried to get into the NBA, haven't got in, wanted to get into making documentaries about NBA sort of stuff, but had no contacts. So he just sent cold emails to all the NBA teams. One of them replied back to him and said, yeah, sure, come along and, we'll give you access to the team. You can make a documentary. And then from there, he said this massive career has come working with him all the time. And he feels like he's living his dream.
Hmm.
And his final two sentences of that GLS was something like, you have to be prepared to fail. What if I'd never sent that email? And when he said that, after I'd spent the last few hours thinking, yeah, it was a fun idea to think about, but I probably won't bother doing it. It
Yeah,
just hit me. It was like a slap on the face going, okay, I've got to send the email and give it a crack. And 2 days later, sent the email. 2 days after that, Laz was very kind enough to reply back and say, sure, and has been very gracious and so helpful and gave me heaps more ideas and leads to follow down. And then, oh, okay, I've never heard of that race before. I'll get info from the people involved with that, which then led me to something else. And I found so many amazing news stories.
yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean, it sounds that your stories are a bit similar to mine because when I first had the idea of starting the podcast, I
Yeah,
couldn't believe no
yeah,
one had actually started a Backyard Ultra podcast before me. Um, and it sounds like you felt similar about the book.
yep, yep, very much. And you're nowhere near running out of story ideas for your podcast, are you?
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
there's always new people I want to have on. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. There's a never-ending supply, and I think more so than the average race,
Mm.
there are great stories to be told because they're pushing people to their limit, and so everyone is stopping for something crazy, whether it's a psychological issue or a mental issue or a logistical reason. There's always some story behind both how they got there and how they got kicked out, basically. Well, how
Yeah.
they fell out of the race.
Yeah.
So we're never going to run out of things to talk about here, are we?
Yeah, it's true. And when you messaged Laz, were you kind of thinking to yourself, okay, I'll message Laz, and if he doesn't write back, I won't. That's the end of that. Because that's kind
Yeah,
of like, yeah, I was like, well, I'll probably ask a couple of people to come on.
yeah,
They'll all say no, and then that will be the end of that. So were you kind of thinking the same thing too?
yeah. I was thinking I'm not going to bother wasting, a huge amount of time going into it. Never realized at the time how much time I'd put into it. Um, it's ended up being a lot more consuming than I thought. But yeah, I wouldn't have gone further
Yeah,
without getting success there.
yeah. And so how long was it from when you first had the idea that you actually put pen to paper and started writing the first words of the
Yeah, yeah. So only a couple of weeks actually. So I think it was the 18th of November was that conference, and then I started writing on the 8th of December.
yeah.
Because I've got an Excel table where every day I write down how long I spend and what I accomplished that day.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
and I started doing this a few years ago for some other writing, like I write articles and stuff, various academic articles, and various other projects I work on. And for years I've thought I should be doing stuff like that, but I never actually did it.
Mm,
And then I created this Excel table, and there's something about writing down what you did. So 2 hours, 3 minutes, Googled Backyard Ultra websites,
yeah,
like just write whatever it is you did, or wrote 12 words or edited one chapter, whatever it is. I find by writing it down, it sort of helps, at least helps my personality style to go, oh, yeah, I actually accomplished something. And then at the end of each week, I'll add it up and say, okay, I worked on it for 6 days and 19 hours, 42 minutes this week. And then I can just go back through and go, oh, yeah, big week, small week. And there's something about writing it down on this Excel spreadsheet that motivates me. And it's sort of some form of, I don't know, I think it helps with my intrinsic motivation to stay focused on it. And you can see something tangible. You
yeah.
can see you're actually doing something because sometimes it feels like you're doing a whole heap of background work and getting nowhere. But by measuring it on there, then it kept me focused and probably kept me excited on the project too.
Yeah, that's unreal. It sounds a little bit like a your own little writing Strava, like
Yeah, yeah,
you're writing stuff.
yep, yeah, 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 pretty much, yeah.
Um, so a question for the running, oh, sorry, a question for the writing nerds out there. What word processor did you use?
Yeah, I ignored the advice I got from most people and just used MS Word.
Right, yeah,
I love Word. I use it all the time, and um, I found it worked perfectly for me. So
yeah,
people kept on recommending other programs, and yeah, they might have been better, but I had to learn so many new things over the last year.
yeah,
Just sticking with my faithful word processor was good.
yeah,
So I was happy to be able to just build my skills in there rather than have to try something else.
yeah. So, as I mentioned, like when I started, I kind of like reached out to a few people, expected everyone to say no, and that would be it. But pretty much most people said yes, and I'm tipping that you had the similar experience to that. So, you would have interviewed a lot of people for the book. So, were you surprised by how agreeable everyone was to help
Oh
out?
yeah, yeah. People were great. Everyone was really quite helpful. Early on, I think some of my some I didn't get replies from some people early on but I think because I was actually saying, hey, can I steal a big chunk of your time?
Right.
Um, so what I found afterwards, though, was once I did a whole heap of research, I'd then say, okay, here's what I've found. Can you just help me with this one small bit, or can you read what I've written already? Is this right, or can you improve it?
Yeah.
And people were much more open to do that rather than a big open-ended thing.
Yeah, cool. These are some good tips. So how many people did you interview for the book?
I only interviewed the only full interviews were actually with Laz and Phil.
Right.
But in terms of probably longer form emails, about 130.
Wow.
Yeah. So
100.
and also partly that was about time management as well,
Yeah.
because I just knew I knew at a time frame that I was aiming for, and uh, email, live interviews just take so much longer as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess if you're sending emails with questions, they can think about their answers, right?
Yep. Yep.
And you've got them all there in front of you. You don't have to listen back to your recordings and things like that too, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And every interview I did do, and there were multiple of those for those guys I did do.
Yeah.
You prepare for it, do the interview, record it, listen to it again afterwards, take more notes, and yeah, it's quite a lot of time in that.
Yeah, yeah,
So email I found much more efficient.
yeah. Um, Now I'm tipping that pretty much everyone who you corresponded with was awesome, but did you have any favorite people who you interviewed?
Um, oh yeah, yeah. Like there were a bunch that was super helpful. I really liked John from Norway, John Ashgel.
Right.
He was one of my favorites. He's actually written a song. Have you interviewed John?
Oh no, I haven't. No.
Yeah, so he's actually written a song called "Last One Standing." So he's a race director. He won the championships. He's written a song about backyard ultras, and sometimes he'll play it at backyard ultras.
Oh,
Yeah, a really good guy.
yeah,
Uh, Frank the Tank was really cool as well.
yeah.
Uh, he sent me a bunch of pictures of things like him crossing the finish line wearing a beer suit. So like he looks like a beer bottle as he's crossing the line, and gave me lots of really great stories. Yeah, so they're two that stand out. But as you said, everyone was just lovely because that's something. There's something infectious about the backyard ultra. I think because it's such a social race that you're seeing each other at the start of the race, it attracts people who are friendlier, who really enjoy the format and are good for a chat. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's a great community,
yeah,
which
yeah.
you obviously know better than anyone from all of your having talked to so many. How many podcasts are you up to?
Oh, I'm nearing 90. So it's, yeah, nearing, I think this might be 88 or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I've been doing it for pretty much exactly 2 years.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm. Um, yeah, and look, I mean, everyone's so helpful. And when I had Frank the Tank on the podcast as well, like he was great. And his actually episode, probably more people have messaged me about that one episode with him than anyone else.
Okay. Yeah,
He
wow.
a funny
No,
guy.
it's quite the character.
Yeah. Um, were there any while you were doing the book, were there any particular runners or stories that resonated with you, or strongest than any, or stronger than any others?
Oh yeah, to be honest, the two that really stood out were both from Biggs last year, and both. I don't know how you watched it, but what I did was I set my iPad up on the live stream, and I had it with me pretty much constantly. So when I was working, I'd turn the sound off, so I wasn't because I can't do two things at a time.
Yeah.
But I just occasionally just glance down to it and have a quick look. But whenever I was having a meal, I wouldn't read or watch TV or anything like that. I'd have my iPad there and I'd watch whatever was happening. And on two of my breaks, I had two of the most amazing scenes. One was, I don't know if you remember Amanda Nelson finishing. It was just heart wrenching. She gets her PB, rings the bell at Biggs, and then just falls down in the starting corral, and then the crew come over to help her. And just watching that live as it's happening
Mm.
was heart-wrenching to see the agony and the pain. So that was, yeah, that was astounding stuff. And so it was great to hear a bit more from her about her perspective on that. Um, and then from the same race, Hendrik Bury
Yeah.
um, being disqualified for the
Mm.
marker. For no, not well, he wasn't disqualified for not taking his tracker. He was disqualified for coming back and getting
Yeah.
the tracker.
Yeah.
And that was just awful. Uh,
Mm.
it was right. He was trying to do the right thing. Laz did the right thing with the rules,
Mm.
but oh, just so painful, and to see his pain. And he was one of the guys I was thinking, he could go all the way. He'll
Yeah.
be there right at the end, and he looked fresh when he finished. But I actually didn't get through to him. I tried in 3 or 4 different ways, and then months afterwards, after I'd actually finished the book, um, he actually replied and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I've been away. Blah blah blah." And he was so helpful, so kind, so generous, which is what I'd always imagined, because he just, in everything I've seen of him, he just seems like the nicest guy.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was great.
Yeah.
And so even at that late stage, he was really quite helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've chronicled the history of backyard ultras from their beginning till now. Um, so how do you see the future of backyard ultras over, say, the next 10 years?
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? And so for one thing, I've actually been quite relieved every race this year that hasn't broken the world record, because I was hoping the book would come out with the last race I covered, which was that Harvey's 108 last year, still being the world record and still being the greatest race.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure next week, well, in 2 weeks' time, which will be the week after the book launches, new history will be made.
Yeah.
So I've been quite relieved that the future hasn't arrived yet. But yeah, I can easily see it going to 140, 150. The real question is what'll be the rule changes that will happen in years to come. And I think probably very little will change rule-wise in the next decade or so. And to be honest, I think Laz has got the formula right. I think he's done a fantastic job with it. Give it 20 years in the future, though, then you go, oh, things will have to, there'll have to be different ways of managing the system. There'll have to be a broader team. Who knows whether Tennessee will always be the spot where the world championships will be? Who knows where the numbers will be? Will people get to that homeostasis of just being able to run forever?
Yeah.
Because 108 hours is absolutely massive. But in some of my research, I noticed that Ron Grant, who's the guy who mentored Tim Walsh from Dead Cow Gully,
Mm.
Ron Grant was a great Australian runner, was the first person to do a lap of Australia. He actually set a record of going the furthest per hour for 1,000 hours. Evidently, it's a Guinness World Record.
Right.
And I think he did it was in the vicinity of 3 hours, sorry, 3 kilometers.
Yeah.
So less than half of a backyard ultra, but almost 10 times as long.
So he
So,
went. He ran for 1,000 hours.
yes,
And how far did he go?
about 3 kilometers. Um, and I don't think I've got it here, but I was looking the other day, and there's a Sri Lankan guy that's got the record now, and it's closer to I think around 3.5, 4 kilometers per hour for
Ah,
1,000 kilometers.
I
Sorry,
see.
for 1,000 hours.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's still a lot less than a backyard ultra, but it does make me think maybe they can go a really stupidly long way.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think though running 3 kilometers an hour allows you to get much more sleep though, and
mm,
that's the pivotal thing.
yeah.
Like if 15 minutes of sleep just isn't enough to keep going forever. But
Well,
yeah,
the weekend we just had, or the last week we just had, was the Australian 6 Day Championships, which you might have followed.
yeah.
And I was interested to see Blaine Burke, who ran almost 900 kilometers in those 6 days. When he reached the 108 hour mark, I was really interested to see how that measured up, if against the backyard ultra pace. And
Yeah.
I think he did. 680 kilometers in 108 hours. So that's less than
Yeah,
backyard ultra pace. So it just goes to show how amazing going
yeah,
for 108 hours in a backyard ultra is.
yeah,
Because he broke record, he was breaking age group records and everything in that race. So that 108 hours in a backyard ultra is just amazing.
yeah. Oh, ridiculous, isn't it?
um,
But I do think I would be surprised if that record's not broken in 2 weeks' time, no
oh
matter how
yeah,
awesome I think the 108 is.
yeah, 100% sure. And I mean, a 6 day race is a lot different from a backyard ultra as well, because in a 6 day race, I'm sure he spent a lot of that just running on his own. Whereas in
Yeah,
a backyard ultra, you're running with other runners, and in this case, your teammates who are going to be pulling you along when things get tough. So
yeah,
yeah, it's a lot different. So online as well. I mean, you would see on Facebook and things like that. There is quite a bit of debate whether or not males and females should have their own categories. So how do you find that playing out over the next few years?
yeah, yeah. Look, that's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, and I can really see the debate on either side. I would suggest nothing's going to change in the next 5 or 10 years, um, but I think it's really going to depend on how well women keep performing. If we get a bigs one year where there's zero there,
Mm,
I think that would just say, "I'm sorry, we need to change the rules." So, but if we can still keep getting quite a number of ladies there, and the ladies there last year were a highlight. Their stories were fantastic.
mm,
But if that stops happening, then that would add to the argument against it.
yeah,
But yeah, I'm not going to. Who knows how that will play out?
yeah.
Again, if I was going 20 years into the future, I'd suggest they'll have categories at some point.
Mm,
That's the yeah. There's some pretty strong arguments there.
yeah. And what about prize money or even say like a professional backyard ultra league? Do you think something like that could happen in the future?
Yeah, well, I often think TV stations are hungry for content. They want to have things that they can put on which don't cost a huge amount of money. How awesome would it be is just to have a 108, 150 hours of content that you can say to a TV station, hey, people can tune into for an entire week. They can watch this. You can have awesome commentary. You can have David Paddo Patterson as one of your top analysts there, explaining what's happening, telling people, oh yes, and this here is Phil Gore from Australia. He's done this before. Explain the context of a few previous races, backstories. There'd be so much
Mm,
fascinating stuff you could give in the commentary,
yeah,
and it'd be a great format and one of the cheapest to
yeah,
produce for TV stations.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Whether it
Look,
happens or not, who knows? But I've heard a few podcasts. There's one in the US I was listening to where they're actually debating uh, the idea of having backyard ultras in the Olympics.
right, yeah,
I seriously don't think it would ever happen, but what a great idea. You just have it running for the first week of the Olympics,
yeah,
maybe the second week, and just you have one channel that's just the Backyard Ultra Olympics that channel.
yeah,
Man, I'd be watching that more than most of the other sport.
yeah, yeah. Me too. I mean, if people can sit down and happily watch golf for 4 days, then they should be. I
Okay.
mean, backyard watching a backyard ultra is a lot more entertaining than that.
Yeah. Yeah, so something like cricket as well. So cricket and golf are things that there's often not a huge amount of action happening. There's big gaps. But
Mm,
what makes them interesting is the maths involved. And
yeah,
if so, you look at a cricket score, you're not watching it. You walk into the room, you see the cricket's on, you look at all the numbers, and if you follow the game, you can understand that all those numbers tell a story, and you suddenly go, oh, this is actually a really exciting point of the game, or this is a bit boring right here. And
yeah,
so then you might sit down and watch the next couple of hours because those numbers tell a story. And there are a few sports that are like that where the numbers are fascinating. And you don't get much more fascinating than the numbers in backyard ultras as
Yeah.
you're looking at what's happening, especially for the satellite championships, seeing what's happening in all the different countries around the world.
Yeah.
Uh, it's fascinating the deeper you get into it, I think.
Yeah. I
You,
think.
you and I could be biased, though. We're probably above average fans, I think. Yeah.
Well, I think that the Sat Champs this year, I mean, compared to 2 years ago, is going to be more exciting because 2 years ago there was less than 50 teams. They weren't It
Yeah.
wasn't filling up the 50 team quota.
Yep.
This year there's 64 countries involved, so it means there's going to be a battle to fill those bottom few positions from like say 45 down to 50.
Yeah.
Those countries are really going to be fighting hard. It's going to bring in some, make it more interesting early in the race.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I actually think that's a great idea
Mm.
because that way it puts in a lot more tension on the smaller teams because you don't want to drop out and be the 51st team and be the highest ranked winner not to go to bigs the next year. You go, oh,
Oh
man, come on,
yeah,
assist. You can do one more lap. Come on, just one
yeah,
more. You can do it.
yeah,
You'd be
yeah,
so annoyed.
yeah. Um, so once you've finished writing, there is no finish. What process did you have to go through to get it published, printed, and everything like that?
Yeah, so I actually finished when I finished April. I finished writing it then, which feels like ages ago, but I've been just as busy every day since then
Right.
because it's been just a massive amount. Well, one of the key things was fact checking everything
Mm.
that I'd written down, and so that was the 130 people at various stages contacting them. Okay, here's what I've written. Is this right? And then over and over again, people would write back and say, "Yeah, no, that's great, except you got this wrong, and this wrong, and this wrong, and this wrong." And sometimes it was really quite embarrassing.
Right.
Just stupid mistakes. And sometimes it was just I'd just written the wrong thing. I knew the right thing, but you just make a mistake and write it down.
Yeah.
Often, though, the sources of data were wrong.
Right.
So I'm relying on DUV for the results. I spent so much time on that, on backyardultra.com itself, race reports, social media reports, your magnificent podcast, where other interviews, wherever I could find data. But often the data I relied on, not your podcast, the data was actually wrong. And so, and then someone would say, "Oh, no, no, here is what happened." Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. So it was always both embarrassing and a massive relief as well to find the results, to fix the errors. Um, yeah, and so that was really helpful, but also just slowed me down massively because once you find the mistakes, then it's quite a bit of effort to go through and change all those things and,
Yeah.
and get all that right.
Yeah.
But so worthwhile, so valuable. I wouldn't exchange that. And it also made me realize that so many articles that are written in running magazines or just general media about backyard ultras, um, I don't think they actually do take fact checking all that seriously because there's so much stuff in there that
Yeah.
I was relying on. You go, this has been published by a reputable uh, media site, but so many details were wrong.
Yeah.
And I assume if it's published, then it's going to be accurate. And also, I've got to acknowledge that despite all that work, there still will be mistakes in what I've done. And so, if you're listening and I've got something wrong about you, I do apologize. I'm sorry, but I have done everything I possibly can to try and get it as accurate as possible because
Yeah.
this is now a history book. This is telling the history of the first 13 years of backyard ultras, and I want to get it as accurate as possible.
Yeah. Unreal. Yeah. Like when you mention like other websites and things who do articles, I think they just it's a lot of clickbait and they're just trying to get things up there quickly to get as many consistent hits and clicks. So um, they're not as concerned about getting things right as they should be.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So that took a fair while, all the proofreading side of things, and then I employed an editor I have to
Right.
do a couple of rounds of going through it and improve all that. But then once you get it back from the editor, then I have to go through and read everything he's done and go, do I agree with all of his edits? And
Yeah.
because sometimes you go, oh, maybe not. And so I think 90% of his edits I went with, but that's still a really slow process. Then sent it out to some proofreaders. And again, just because people make a change doesn't necessarily mean so you're going to go through all, it's about 100,000 words. Go
Yeah.
read all over and over and over again. And I'm trying to do an audio book for it as well, and
Cool.
similar sort of process with that.
Yeah.
That's been much of the last few weeks, actually.
Yeah.
Do the recording and then trying to get that right. Just it all adds up.
Yeah. And you'll be reading it yourself on the audiobook?
Yeah, that wasn't my first thought, but just anyone I spoke to about it said, "Oh, look, if there's stuff in there that you've done in there, it just makes so much more sense for it to be you."
Yeah.
So, but you know how everyone hates hearing their own voice. You go, oh, I don't know, this could be a bit cringe.
So it sounds like it took was it about 5 months from the very first word? Or actually, how long was it from the first word to actually holding the finished?
Yeah, so I scribbled that down before, I think. Yeah, 14th of August. No, 22nd of August, I got the first one. So that was what, 9 months after I started.
Yeah.
That was so exciting to actually get it because I'd heard so many horror stories of people getting their book and then the cover just looks awful, or
Um,
it's actually someone else's book, or there's some pages that are around the wrong way. And I just picked it up and thought, this is beautiful. It's like my little baby's been delivered. That, yeah, well, it was literally 9 months
yeah.
that had been gestating inside of me. Much less painful, let's be honest. But oh, it was just the best feeling to
Yeah.
finally see. And
Yeah.
then I skim through it and go, oh, there's a mistake there.
Oh,
You're joking. And so then I quickly read through it all again, found another half a dozen mistakes, but I'd only had one book delivered at that point, and then
right.
went through and then changed it more again.
Yeah.
Um, and then as I've been doing the audio book over the last couple of weeks, I've found a few more mistakes as well. Like suddenly
Mm.
there's a period in the middle of a sentence. You go, what? How dare
Mm.
all these proofreaders have missed that? But they're pretty minor. And so now they're all changed for future editions as well.
Yeah.
So they'll all be fixed up. But even in, I've been reading a David Baldacci book the last week. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, but like massive, sold 90 million books or so. There's still grammar and punctuation mistakes in that as well. So,
Yeah.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
I'm in good company there.
Yeah. I mean, I read a lot and I mean, nearly every book you'll come across one or two
Yeah,
errors. I think
yeah,
it's normal.
yeah.
So what would you say was the hardest thing about writing the book?
Um, probably my hardest moment, I'd say. Like probably everything was a bit hard,
Yeah.
but nothing was overwhelming. But probably the hardest moment was knowing whether it was actually okay or not.
Right.
So I've put all this effort into it, and then you'll know because you were one of them. I sent out copies to about I think 25 people or so to say, hey, can you read this and see what you think? And at that stage, I'd sent it just to a couple of family members, and they'd said, "Oh, it's fantastic," but they're encouraging people and they love me, and so they're going to be pretty biased. And then for a few weeks, I just hear nothing back. And one of the early replies was, oh, yeah, I didn't really have much time to read it. I'm not much of a reader. Oh, no, that's code for I hated the book. It's awful. But I don't want to I don't want to actually say I hated it. So I'm going to say I didn't read it. Oh, no. Okay, cool. Well, I enjoyed the process. It's been lots of fun anyhow. And if it goes nowhere, that's okay. But then the replies slowly started coming back. And then I'd run from my office and say to one of my daughters, this backyard ultra runner has just said this. And they'd go, we've never heard of that person. Well, trust me, in the world of backyard ultras, this is big, this is good. And then someone else. And so they're now much more familiar with all the stars of the backyard ultra.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, the feedback has actually been overwhelmingly positive, which was quite the relief
Yeah.
because in that couple of weeks, it was yes, quite the big question mark in my mind as to how it would go. I still might still sell zero copies. You never know what's going to happen when you release your baby out into the world. This is a niche market here, not just runners, but ultra runners, but backyard ultras. It's pretty niche. But yeah, but I'm now proud of the finished product though.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
unreal. One of my favorite authors, his name's JD Barker, and I've read a little bit about him, like interviews and things like that. He writes mainly thrillers and horror books, but one of the things he does after a day's writing, he'll always find time to go for a run. It helps clear his
yeah.
mind. So, did you incorporate running with writing, and did running help with your writing?
Oh yeah, definitely. And in fact, it's been one of the things I've learned over the last decade or so that when I'm ridiculously busy, when I'm particularly stressed in whatever the source is, then it's more important than ever that I go for running, just because not necessarily to think about whatever the problem is, but it lowers my stress levels, it clears my thinking, and regularly I will come back with all sorts of great ideas and problem solve, and it's just feeling better. So I normally don't take my phone with me when I'm running because I just don't like having it in my hand
Yeah,
or having it in a backpack. But I started doing it a bit while I was writing because I'd be running along thinking about something else. I might be listening to a different podcast or something, and then just suddenly an idea had come to mind about something that I could write or a way of wording something better or someone to contact. And so then I just pull out my phone, and often I'd hit the dictation button and I'd keep running and I'd go, okay, okay, say this, write this, contact this person. And it's all a bit breathless. And then the next morning I'd look at those notes and it would be gibberish. It would be so difficult to decode. And but normally I'd be able to get the gist of it. And that was really helpful. So yeah, running was just so crucial. I was thinking I might need to back off running a fair bit, but I probably ran a bit more than usual because it was so helpful in
yeah,
the creative process.
yeah, yeah.
And it was really, this was going to be a year that was going to be really easy for my entire life to go out of whack because I've got an awesome family. I've got four daughters at home and my wife at home. Um, Work a full-time job, and this has added about 20 hours per week. Probably on average, most weeks I've done probably 18 to 20 hours most weeks,
Wow.
just on top of all my other responsibilities. And I volunteer on a bunch of other places as well, do a local park run and do stuff in my church and all sorts of other things. And somehow I've needed to find time for this extra 20 hours. And so the chance of exploding this year was really quite high. And so
Yeah,
for me, running and de-stressing and being out there, whether with mates or alone, was one of the most effective strategies I had.
yeah, yeah. Um, so the book launch, it's this weekend.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited.
Yeah. Tell me all about it. Like, can people still go, or is it sold out? Or
Yeah. So we've still got space. I think we're looking like about 120, 130 people at this stage, which is great because I've heard a bunch of stories of book launches where only one or two people that weren't related to them turned up. I went, oh, that would be awkward. But yeah, no. So I'm pretty happy with the numbers. But definitely could take more people. It's on the south side of Brisbane, so I know people listening all around the world to your podcast. So there's a fairly smaller Brisbane audience, I guess. But yeah, anyone would be more than welcome. I've got a website, runningforever.au, and if you go to there, you can just RSVP on that. But
yeah,
frankly, if you just turn up, that'll be okay as well.
yeah. And I understand that you're going to have, or are you allowed to say you've got some people?
Yeah, yeah. Phil Gore's going to zoom in. We're going to have Laz zoom in as well. So yeah, that'll be fantastic to be able to chat to them.
Yep,
So yeah, that'll be really quite excited. And so we'll talk a bit about the book and probably a bit more about the satellite championships as well.
yep, yep.
Uh,
And you've actually got Australian representative Nachi is going to be there in person too, right?
yes, yes, that'll be fantastic to have her there. So she was already coming along. Oh well, now you're on the team. Could you please tell us a bit about your story there? So very, very excited.
Yeah, that will be unreal. So how do people get their hands on the book?
Yeah, so it's available in some independent bookstores, and frankly, if it's not at your local bookstore, please ask. But it is available on Amazon, anywhere in the world. Or if you go to if you're in Australia, it's fairly easy just to go to the website, and you can, there's payment links in there. You can just click purchase there, and we'll post it out to you.
Yep.
But also, I can work out group deals as well. So if any events wanted to have copies to sell at their own version, I can work out all sorts of great discounts there. But yeah, runningforever.au is the main website where all the info is,
Okay.
or the Backyard Ultra story on socials.
Yeah. All
But
right.
yeah, Amazon's the easy option.
Yep. Okay. And the name of the book is There Is No Finish. Is that right?
Yeah, There Is No Finish, the Backyard Ultra story.
Yep. All right. Perfect. Now, have you started writing part two yet?
No, no. Because frankly, I've still got no free time left. This is still consuming, and probably it's still gonna be busy for quite a while.
Yeah.
My list of things to do, even just this week, is ridiculously long.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think maybe like in 10 years you'll write a part two?
Yeah, so I'm definitely open to the idea because there's going to be more twists and chapters, and to be honest, there's so many controversies that you could jump into. There were probably 3 or 4 chapters that I've toyed with writing this time that I decided not to go with.
Right.
I thought there's lots more that could be explored, but what I focused on this time on was just trying to tell the best stories and not go into the more controversial discussions and different things there. I thought let's just tell the best story I possibly can.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. So as far as your running goes, like, I mean, you had a good result at Clint Eastwood doing 24 hours. What have you got lined up in the future as far as your running goes?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit light for the next couple of months, but I have been a bit injured lately, and so I'm desperately trying to get fit for. By backyard standards, it's pretty small, but in December, Raid Adventures does an event called the Urban Rogue. It's just a 3-hour race around Brisbane City. It's on a Friday night, and it's a Rogaine style. So you're given a map, and then there's all these checkpoints, and then in a team you run around and try and get as many of the checkpoints as you possibly can. And it's just the best fun. But the last 2 years I've been pretty injured for it.
Right.
So we had a really good record the first 9 years of the event. Yeah, probably I think we won it 2/3 of the time.
Yeah.
But just I've been too injured lately. So this year my main goal is I just want to be healthy for that and be able to run that as hard as I possibly can.
Yeah. And what about backyard ultras? Do you think like you'll be at Dead Cow Gully in June or any other?
Oh, how could I not? Yeah. So seriously, if half the backyard world is going to be there,
Yeah.
and I think 20 to 25 people have signed up that I know of that have been helpful for me in the book in
Right.
various ways.
Wow. Yeah.
And so even if I hadn't have got an entry, I just would have driven out anyhow just to say thank you so much. I just want to meet you in person and say thank you.
Yeah.
It's going to be the best time. And
Yeah.
I've got a bunch of friends coming out as well who are going to run it and support crew. So
Yeah.
I can't wait. It's going to be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. It
And,
is.
and because there's an entire chapter in the book about the Australian Backyard Masters, and that was just an epic. And next year the lineup is even bigger and better. Oh, I shudder to think about how great it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're going to be there too, aren't you?
Yeah. I'll be there. I'll be doing the live stream again. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you'll be quite the expert by then.
Yeah. Well, I was pretty happy with how it went this year. I had a lot of fun doing it. So yeah, I mean, it's just something fun, something I enjoy doing, kind of like added on to the podcast, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea. It just makes it so much more fun. I followed a lot of Dead Cow Gully this year as well, and I appreciated your coverage.
Yeah, thanks. And so you're obviously running at Dead Cow Gully, but any other backyard ultras before then, or is that your next backyard ultra?
Yeah, I think that is my next one. Sometimes I was toying with maybe doing the Glasshouse Standy in December, but I think we've got a family holiday then.
Right.
But that's a great one. It starts 5 o'clock on New Year's Eve, and then you run into the next day. So you get to run in 2 different years.
Yeah.
Be a bit hot though as well. So
Yeah, I know it was hot last year, but it's definitely a race I would love to do. If it's, I've just got to coordinate it with work, and
yeah,
I won't be there this year, but hopefully I am
yeah,
sooner rather than later.
yeah.
Um, Now, we mentioned that you did your 24 hours at Clint Eastwood. Are you going to set any goals higher than that and maybe reach 30 hours? Do you have any goals to?
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to hit 30, and yeah, you're not supposed to hit, you're not supposed to set targets. I know the way it works. You're not supposed to set limits. But to be honest, in my head, I've sort of said I think 36 is probably the most that I could do. 'Cause I actually don't train that much. Like I train probably 4 or 5 times a week, and I'm only running 40 to 50 kilometers most week. And whenever I hear your interviews and people say, oh yeah, I'm just doing my base 120 kilometers this week, but I'll bring it up to 180
Yeah,
as they're getting closer to the race. And oh, my body would just break from that sort of amount. Um, and my life's pretty busy. I'm not going to increase my training that much.
yeah.
So, I'd be happy to keep going forever as well. So if I happen to just keep going, I'll take it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now you probably know, Stephen, that I do like getting three backyard ultra tips from my guests near the end of their podcast. I mean, you've done 24 hours, you've spoken to pretty much the who's who of backyard ultra running. So I'm interested to hear what your three backyard ultra tips are.
Yeah, and I have listened to all your podcasts, so I really should have planned some better answers. Um, but I can think of two straight away. Definitely enjoy yourself. You've got to have lots of fun. I remember my first backyard I did. Every time I'd cross the line, my crew would say, "How are you feeling?" And I'd say some variant of, "I am having the best time. This is the best thing I've ever done." It was so much fun. I loved it. And I think that's pivotal. You've got to be enjoying yourself. You've got to be able to um, see it as something you enjoy and be able to keep going when you're not enjoying it as well.
Mm.
But I think aim to enjoy yourself and not see it as a masochistic thing. See it as something that brings you great joy.
Yeah,
Um, Probably the second one is look after your support crew really well. So um, I, I always have a fair few people there as support crew to try and be helpful. And it'll be really easy to either ignore them or sometimes you just do things yourself. So I'm trying to make it a habit of just sitting down on my chair and then saying, "Hey, could you please think in advance about what I can ask them to do?"
mm,
And give them some documentation beforehand saying, "Here's a list of things that you can do," because they're there to actually help. So if I'm not using them, if I'm not giving them things to do or not paying attention to them, then it just seems rude and a waste of their time. So I want to honor and validate them as much as possible by interacting with them and allowing them to help me because that's what they're there for.
yeah,
Uh, and probably the third one is just try and stay as positive as possible throughout the entire thing and look for the good in the situations. And when you're running with someone and you see that they're suffering, try and help them to see another way of viewing the situation and see the positive. Or, oh, okay, how far away are you from your best result? Or, okay, do you think maybe you could try this differently? Do you think maybe that could help? Or whatever you can do to help to stay a bit more positive.
mm,
Because and I've always had a bit of an optimistic personality as well. But as I've been doing the research for this, that's been one of the persistent things that came out in the stories of the Backyard Ultras, that the people who seemed to do the best were those who were more positive and encouraging and grab others along with them, like the
mm,
classic Harvey Lewis, his bus or train in Biggs last year. It looked like he was dying and suffering out there on the course, but he'd still be talking to everyone, "Hey, yeah, come with me, stick with me." And you look and you see the photos and there's 15, 20 people all running along in this group together that he's
yeah,
dragging along. And somehow by him helping them, encouraging them, they're actually pushing him along as well.
mm,
And somehow by you being positive and encouraging to others, it helps you and helps you to go further. So I
yeah,
think that positive, encouraging persona is really quite helpful.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah, definitely. Um, so writing a book, I mean, it's a huge achievement, and I'm also interested to hear if you've got any tips or advice for people out there who might want to write a book?
Yeah. Um, to be honest, I think I mentioned before my Excel spreadsheet, just something that actually is tangible, where you record what you're doing, gives you great motivation because it's easy to say, oh, I want to do something. But often we say we're going to do something or we think we're doing something, but we're actually really slack and we don't do it. But by writing down what you've accomplished is really helpful because I guess the thing before that is you actually have to do something every day or 5 days a week. You need to be doing something almost every day. So just start writing, assume it's going to be awful, assume it's going to be terrible, but just get it out there because as you write, it will get better. And then a lot of the early stuff you've written will never see the light of day, but it will help you to get to the stuff that is much better. Because it's like any skill that it's not just practice that makes perfect, it's patient reflection on your practice will make perfect. So that the more you do something and then reflect on what you've done, adjust what you're doing as a result of that, and keep on refining what you're doing. Like running, sorry, writing is just the same as running. We will improve by doing more of it, patiently reflecting what we're doing, changing our practices, and getting better.
Yeah.
So just get started and then record what you're doing.
Yeah, unreal. Yeah, look, congratulations again on writing the book. I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be a big hit, and I'm looking forward to um, seeing photos from the book launch. I'm assuming there'll be some photos floating around
That's
out
that's
there.
the plan. Yeah, no, thanks very much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All the best, and look, and I guess I'll meet you in June at Dead Cow Gully.
Yeah, I can't wait. Can't wait. And one thing, if you don't mind me saying, one thing I'm desperately hoping people can do is jump onto the Amazon or Goodreads websites, and once they've had a look at the book themselves, and put a review on there.
Yeah,
You don't actually have to have bought it from Amazon to review on Amazon, but you do. I think you have to have spent $50 on Amazon to write a review. But
yeah,
things like reviews are really helpful for those algorithms that pretty much decide what springs up in people's eyes.
yeah.
So, yeah, the more reviews I can get. Frankly, if you hate the book, put a 1-star review on there. That's still really helpful.
Right, really? Okay.
Yeah,
And so it's going to be on Goodreads, or is it on Goodreads already? Or
yeah, there's a Goodreads link.
yeah, yeah,
If you
awesome.
go to Goodreads and just type it in, it comes up there. So
Yeah, yeah, I love Goodreads, so yeah,
yeah, that's good fun. Yeah, and so
yeah,
basically, the more reviews I get on either of those, then the more likely the right people will find it.
yeah, yeah, great, awesome. Well, look, thanks heaps for coming along, Stephen. It's been a really, really good chat, and yeah, hopefully, well, I'm sure the book launch will go great.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Pato, and thank you so much for all of your service to the Backyard Ultra community over the last couple of years.
No worries.
Yeah, you've been such a massive help through all this process. I really, really appreciate all those episodes that you've put together. Yeah,
Oh, awesome. Thanks. Thanks. I appreciate that. Awesome. Well, stay there. I'll hit stop on the record.
thanks,
But
mate.
yeah, I'll speak to you soon.